The hospital gown felt cold against my skin as I lay on the gurney at 6 o'clock in the morning. My hands trembled, not from the chill, but from fear. I was 62 years old, and this was my first major surgery. The doctors said I needed an emergency hysterectomy. The pain in my abdomen had become unbearable over the past month. I reached for Malcolm's hand beside me, squeezing it tight. He pulled away, checking his phone. "Malcolm, please stay with me until they take me in," I whispered. He sighed loudly, his face twisted with annoyance. "Diane, I have an important meeting at 9. I already told you this." My chest tightened. We had been married for 38 years. In all that time, I had never asked him for much. But today, lying here terrified, I needed my husband. "It's just 2 more hours," I pleaded, my voice breaking. He stood up, straightening his expensive gray suit. "The nurses will take care of you. That's what we're paying them for." Then he walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving me alone with my fear. The nurse, a kind woman named Patricia, noticed my tears. She squeezed my shoulder gently and whispered, "Don't worry, honey. You're going to be fine." But I wasn't crying about the surgery anymore. I was crying because my husband had just shown me exactly how little I mattered to him. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I thought about our marriage. Malcolm was a successful businessman who owned 3 car dealerships in our city. He provided well financially, but over the years he had become distant and cold. I had raised our 2 children, Thomas and Claire, mostly alone. I had cooked his meals, cleaned his house, and supported his career for nearly 4 decades. And now, when I needed him most, he chose a meeting over me. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face. "Count backward from 10, she said softly. As the world faded to black, my last thought was how alone I felt, even after 38 years of marriage. I woke up in the recovery room 6 hours later. The pain was intense. "The house was a mess without you," Malcolm said, scrolling through his phone while I lay there in pain. "When are you coming home? Not how are you feeling? Or I'm sorry I left you. Just when could I come back to serve him?" I stared at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled. His designer watch gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His face showed no concern, no guilt, just mild irritation at the inconvenience of my illness. "I needed you, Malcolm," I said quietly. He finally looked up from his phone. "Don't be dramatic, Diane. You're fine. The surgery went well, didn't it?" Something snapped inside me. I could have died on that table. "And you left me alone because of a meeting." He rolled his eyes. "You're being emotional. This is exactly why I didn't stay. I knew you'd make a scene." That's when I knew. I knew with absolute clarity that my marriage was over. When I returned home 5 days after surgery, the house was indeed a mess. Dirty dishes filled the sink. Malcolm's clothes were scattered across the bedroom floor. The trash hadn't been taken out. I stood in the doorway of our large, empty house and felt nothing but coldness. Malcolm was already back at work, as if nothing had happened. My doctor had given me strict instructions. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, 6 weeks of rest. I needed help with basic tasks. I called Malcolm at his office. His secretary, a woman named Vanessa, answered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrison. Malcolm is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" I left 3 messages that day. He didn't call back. By evening, I was exhausted from simply trying to feed myself. The pain medication made me dizzy, but I couldn't reach the high cabinet where Malcolm had stored the extra pills. I called him again. This time he answered. "What is it, Diane?" "I'm Busse. I need help with my medication. Can you come home? For God's sake, you're not helpless. Figure it out." He hung up on me. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen. That night, I slept in the guest room downstairs because I couldn't climb the stairs. I lay in the dark, thinking about my life. I had met Malcolm when I was 24, fresh out of college, working as a secretary at his father's company. He had been charming, ambitious, and handsome. We married within a year. I thought I was lucky. For the first decade, things were good. But slowly, year by year, he changed. Or maybe I had just finally opened my eyes. The next morning, Claire came over with groceries and her fury. "Mom, this is unacceptable," she said, cleaning the kitchen while I sat at the table. "Dad has completely abandoned you." She helped me upstairs, made my bed, and organized my medications. Before she left, she hugged me carefully, mindful of my stitches. "You don't have to live like this, Mom. You know that, right?" I nodded, but inside, I was already planning. While Claire was there, I asked her to bring down a box from my closet. Inside were all our financial documents. Malcolm handled all the money, all the accounts, all the investments. I had trusted him completely. Now I needed to know exactly what we had. That afternoon, despite the pain, I sat at the dining table and went through every paper. What I found made my blood run cold. Malcolm had opened a credit card in my name without telling me. The balance was $47,000. The charges were all at expensive restaurants, jewelry stores, and hotels. Places I had never been. My hands shook as I kept digging. Bank statements showed regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars, moving out of our joint savings every month for the past 2 years. I found receipts tucked in envelopes. Flowers sent to an address I didn't know. Dinner reservations for 2 at romantic restaurants. Hotel bookings in cities where Malcolm claimed he traveled alone for business. The truth crashed over me like ice water. Malcolm wasn't just neglectful. He was unfaithful. I called my friend Dorothy, whom I had known since college. She arrived within an hour, took one look at my face, and knew something terrible had happened. I showed her everything. Dorothy was a retired accountant, sharp as a knife even at 65. She put on her reading glasses and went through each document carefully. "Diane," she said finally, her voice grave. "This isn't just an affair. He's been systematically hiding money from you. See these transfers? He's moving joint funds into private accounts. This could be financial abuse." The words hit me hard. Financial abuse. I had heard the term before, but never thought it could apply to me. Dorothy pulled out her phone and called her nephew, Lucas Bennett, who was a divorce attorney. "Lucas, I'm sending you a client. She needs help immediately." That evening, despite my pain and exhaustion, I made copies of every document. I photographed every receipt, every statement, every suspicious charge. I was done being the victim. Malcolm had left me alone at the hospital. Now I would leave him alone in court. Lucas Bennett met me at his office 3 days later. Claire drove me there, helping me walk since I was still weak from surgery. Lucas was young, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He listened to my story without interruption. I told him about the hospital, about Malcolm's neglect, about the financial documents I'd found. When I finished, Lucas leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Harrison, I need to be honest with you. What your husband has done constitutes both emotional abandonment and potential financial fraud. The credit card debt in your name alone is grounds for legal action." He paused, letting me absorb his words. But divorce, especially after a long marriage with significant assets, can be brutal. Are you prepared for that? I thought about lying alone in that hospital bed. I thought about Malcolm's dismissive voice on the phone. I thought about 38 years of slowly disappearing, until I became invisible in my own marriage. "I'm prepared," I said firmly. Lucas smiled. "Good. Then let's build your case." Over the next week, Lucas worked quickly. He hired a private investigator named Marcus Flynn to follow Malcolm. I felt guilty at first, like I was betraying my marriage vows. But then I remembered Malcolm had betrayed them first long ago. Marcus was efficient. Within 5 days, he had everything we needed. Photographs of Malcolm with a woman named Brenda Cooper. She was 42, worked as a manager at one of his dealerships, and had been his mistress for 3 years. The photos showed them together at hotels, restaurants, and even at a beach house Malcolm had purchased without my knowledge. Marcus also found the financial trail. Malcolm had opened 3 separate bank accounts, moving more than $180,000 from our joint assets over 2 years. He had purchased the beach house in Brenda's name. He had bought her a car, jewelry, and paid for vacations together. All with money that was legally half mine. Lucas laid out all the evidence on his conference table. "This is substantial, Diane. We can pursue this aggressively." But I wanted more than just the affair documented. I wanted the world to know how Malcolm had abandoned me during my surgery. Lucas contacted the hospital and obtained my complete medical records. He got statements from Patricia, the nurse who had witnessed my distress. He documented the exact timeline. Malcolm leaving at 6:47 a.m., my surgery at 8:15 a.m., and his complete absence during my 3-day recovery. Dr. Helena Pierce, my surgeon, provided a written statement. She confirmed that I had been terrified before surgery, that having support was medically recommended, and that Malcolm's absence had been highly unusual and concerning. We built a case not just about money and infidelity, but about cruelty. About a man who had promised in sickness and in health, but had walked away when those words actually mattered. Meanwhile, Malcolm remained clueless. He came home each evening, ate the dinners Claire or Dorothy prepared for me, and complained about his day. He never asked about my recovery. He never apologized to the hospital. He never even noticed I had moved permanently into the guest room. For weeks after my surgery, I was finally healing physically. The stitches had dissolved, the pain had faded to a dull ache, and I could walk without assistance. But emotionally, I felt stronger than I had in years. Lucas called me on a Wednesday morning. "Everything is ready. We can serve him the divorce papers whenever you're ready." I thought about timing. I wanted Malcolm to feel the shock I had felt lying alone in that hospital bed. I wanted him ambushed, unprepared, just as I had been. "Serve him at his office," I said. "Tomorrow at noon, when all his employees are there." Lucas paused. "That's aggressive. Are you sure?" "I'm absolutely sure." The next day, I waited at home. At 12:15 p.m. my phone rang. It was Malcolm, his voice shaking with rage. "What the hell is this, Diane? You're divorcing me? You had me served at my office in front of everyone." I kept my voice calm and cold. "Yes, Malcolm. I'm divorcing you. This is insane." "Over what?" "Because I didn't babysit you at the hospital." "Babysit me?" My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. "I was terrified facing major surgery, and you left me alone because of a meeting. That wasn't a husband. That was a stranger." Malcolm's tone changed, became manipulative. "Diane, you're overreacting. You know I love you. We can work this out. Don't throw away 38 years over one mistake." "One mistake?" "Malcolm, I found the credit card debt. I found the bank transfers. I found a beach house. I know about Brenda." The silence on the other end was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "You've been spying on me? Going through my private papers?" "Our papers, Malcolm. Community property, remember?" He started yelling then, calling me vindictive, crazy, ungrateful. He said I was nothing without him, that I had no money of my own, that I would regret this. I let him rant until he ran out of steam. Then I said quietly, "See you in court, Malcolm," and hung up. That felt better than anything I had in years. Malcolm hired a lawyer the next day. Theodore Walsh, expensive and ruthless, known for destroying spouses in divorce court. But Lucas had anticipated this. We had documents Walsh couldn't dispute. We had witnesses Walsh couldn't discredit. We had a timeline of abandonment that spoke for itself. The first court date was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Malcolm tried everything. He came home with flowers, claiming he wanted to reconcile. I refused to see him. He called Claire and Thomas, trying to turn them against me. Both my children stood firmly by my side. Claire told him, "Dad, you abandoned Mom when she needed you most. You don't get to play victim now." Thomas flew home from California specifically to tell Malcolm to his face, "What you did was unforgivable." Malcolm even tried to cut off access to our joint accounts. Lucas had already anticipated this, and had filed an emergency motion for temporary support. The judge granted it immediately, ordering Malcolm to pay all my expenses until the divorce was finalized. As the court date approached, I learned more about Brenda Cooper. Marcus, the investigator, discovered she wasn't Malcolm's first affair. There had been others over the years. I had been so blind, so trusting. Brenda had worked for Malcolm for 5 years. Their affair started shortly after she joined his company. He had promised her he would leave me, that they would be together. He had used company funds to support their relationship, which meant possible fraud charges. Dorothy helped me document everything for court. We created a timeline showing Malcolm's gradual financial abandonment of our marriage, his increasing emotional distance, and his blatant infidelity. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about the young woman I had been when I married Malcolm. She had been so hopeful, so full of dreams. She had believed in forever. But forever had turned into a prison where I slowly disappeared. At 62, I was reclaiming myself. At 62, I was choosing my dignity over his convenience. At 62, I was finally free. The courthouse was cold and imposing. I wore a simple navy dress and the pearl earrings my mother had given me. Claire and Thomas flanked me on either side as we walked in. Malcolm was already there with Walsh, his lawyer. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. Walsh was a tall man with silver hair and a shark's smile. He approached Lucas before the hearing. My client is willing to offer a settlement. Mrs. Harrison gets the house and half the savings. We avoid the embarrassment of a public trial. Lucas looked at me. I shook my head. We're going to trial, Lucas told him firmly. Judge Patricia Mendoza presided. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Lucas presented our case methodically. He showed the medical records documenting my surgery and recovery. He called Patricia, the nurse, who testified about my distress and Malcolm's abandonment. Her words were powerful. Mrs. Harrison was terrified and alone. In all my years of nursing, I've never seen a spouse abandon their partner during major surgery. It was heartbreaking. Lucas then presented the financial evidence. The credit card debt Malcolm had hidden. The secret bank accounts. The beach house was purchased with marital funds but titled in Brenda's name. The judge's expression grew darker with each revelation. Walsh tried to deflect. Your Honor, many marriages have financial disagreements. Mr. Harrison provided well for his wife for decades. This is simply a matter of. Judge Mendoza cut him off. Counselor, there's a difference between financial disagreements and financial deception. Continue, Mr. Bennett. Lucas called Dr. Pierce, my surgeon, who explained the medical necessity of having support during surgery. Patients with strong emotional support have better outcomes. Mrs. Harrison was put at unnecessary risk. Then came the photographs. Marcus had compiled them into a devastating presentation. Malcolm and Brenda at romantic dinners. Malcolm and Brenda holding hands on a beach. Malcolm and Brenda enter hotels together. I watched Malcolm's face as the photos appeared on the screen. He looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The courtroom was silent except for the click of each new image. Walsh called Malcolm to testify. Malcolm tried to explain himself, but every word made things worse. I was stressed with work. DIANE didn't understand the pressure I was under. Brenda was someone who understood my world. Judge Mendoza interrupted. Mr. Harrison, are you suggesting your wife's major surgery was less important than your business stress? Malcolm stumbled over his words. No, Your Honor. I knew she would be fine. The doctors were competent. I didn't think my presence was necessary. You didn't think your presence was necessary when your wife of 38 years was facing emergency surgery? The judge's voice was nice. Malcolm had no good answer. Walsh tried to redirect, focusing on Malcolm's financial contributions to the marriage. Mr. Harrison built a successful business that provided an excellent lifestyle for his family. Lucas cross-examined brilliantly. Mr. Harrison, who raised your children while you built this business? Malcolm shifted uncomfortably. DIANE did primarily. Who maintained your home, organized your life, supported your career for almost 4 decades? DIANE. And when she needed you most, where were you? Malcolm's silence spoke volumes. Lucas then called me to testify. I walked to the stand with my head high. Lucas asked me to describe the morning of my surgery. I told the truth simply and clearly. I was afraid I might die. I begged my husband to stay with me. He left because of a work meeting. I went into surgery alone, and I woke up alone. At that moment, I realized I had been alone in my marriage for years. My voice didn't waver. I had cried all my tears already. I discovered my husband had been stealing from our joint accounts, hiding money, and supporting a mistress with funds that were half mine. He used my name to accumulate debt I knew nothing about. But the financial betrayal hurt less than the emotional abandonment. He promised to love me in sickness and in health. When I was sick, he chose his comfort over my well-being. Walsh tried to discredit me during cross-examination. "Mrs. Harrison, isn't it true you were overreacting to your husband's absence? That you're using this to justify taking his money?" I looked Walsh directly in the eyes. "I'm not taking his money. I'm reclaiming what was always partly mine. And no, I wasn't overreacting. I was facing major surgery. I was 62 years old and terrified. Any decent human being would have stayed. A husband should have been there without question." The courtroom was utterly silent. Even Walsh seemed to realize he had miscalculated. Judge Mendoza called for a brief recess. When we returned, her expression was stern. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of marital abandonment and financial fraud I've seen in my 20 years on the bench." Malcolm's face went pale. The judge continued, "Mr. Harrison, you violated your marriage vows in the most fundamental way. You abandoned your wife during a medical crisis. You systematically deceived her financially. You conducted an affair using marital assets." She looked directly at Malcolm. "Your behavior was not just legally wrong. It was morally reprehensible." Then she read her ruling. "I received the house, 70% of all marital assets, and Malcolm was ordered to pay all the credit card debt he had hidden in my name. Additionally, Judge Mendoza ordered Malcolm to pay for my medical expenses related to the surgery and recovery. Since Mr. Harrison failed to provide the support his wife needed during her medical crisis, he will compensate her for the emotional distress caused. The beach house Malcolm had purchased for Brenda would be sold, and all proceeds would go to me. Malcolm would also pay my attorney fees. Mr. Harrison, you used marital funds to conduct your affair. You will bear the full cost of dissolving this marriage." Walsh objected strenuously, but Judge Mendoza was unmoved. "Your client made his choices. Now he faces the consequences." As we left the courthouse, Malcolm tried to approach me. Thomas stepped between us immediately. "Don't even think about it." Malcolm looked at me over Thomas's shoulder. For the first time, I saw something like regret in his eyes. "Diane, I never meant to hurt you." I paused, then spoke my final words to him. "You left me alone when I needed you most. That told me everything I needed to know about our marriage. Goodbye, Malcolm." The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. I signed the papers in Lucas's office with Claire beside me. When it was done, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The house was legally mine now. I walked through each room, reclaiming the space. I redecorated the bedroom, removing all traces of Malcolm. I turned his office into a reading room for myself. I planted a garden in the backyard, something Malcolm had never allowed because he said it was too messy. Dorothy came over one evening with wine, and we sat in my new garden watching the sunset. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said simply. "For the first time in years, I feel completely free." Thomas and Claire visited often. We grew closer than we had been in years. They told me they had always seen Malcolm's neglect, but hadn't known how to address it. "Mom, you seem different now," Claire said one day. "Stronger." "I am stronger. I had to lose everything to find myself again." Malcolm, I heard through mutual friends, had lost his relationship with Brenda. She left him when she realized he had no money left to spend on her. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting in my garden when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Malcolm. His voice sounded tired and old. "Diane, I wanted to call and I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not like in court." I said nothing, just listened. "You were right about everything. I was a terrible husband. I took you for granted. I thought you would always be there no matter how I treated you. Losing you made me realize what I had." He paused. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. You deserved so much better than how I treated you." I thought about the young woman I had been, the one who had believed in forever. I thought about the 62-year-old woman I had become. the one who had chosen herself. Thank you for saying that, Malcolm. I hope you become a better person. Then I hung up. I didn't need his apology to heal. I had already healed myself. Today at 63, I live a life I never imagined possible. I volunteer at the hospital, helping other patients who face surgery alone. I share my story, and I see recognition in their eyes. Patricia, the nurse who showed me kindness when I needed it most, became a close friend. We have coffee every Tuesday. I took classes in accounting with Dorothy's help and now manage a small investment portfolio. The money from the divorce gave me financial security I never had before. My children visit often, and our relationships have deepened. They respect the woman I've become. Sometimes late at night, I think about that morning in the hospital. The fear I felt, the abandonment, the loneliness. Those moments changed me forever. I learned that dignity matters more than companionship. I learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. Malcolm left me alone at the hospital that day. But in doing so, he gave me the greatest gift. The chance to find myself again. And when I left him in court, I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was beginning a life. My life. Finally.